جالب اینجاست در مورد امامین عسکریین، آیا میدونید خود سپاه پاسداران امامین عسکریین را منفجر کرد؟ علتش چی بود؟ سامرا، متولیان ذریع سامرا اهل سنت بودن در قرنهای طولانی. البته متاسفانه خب در بین صوفی های اهل سنت هم این قضیه رواج داشت و جایز نیست، چه سنی باشه چه شیعه باشه جایز نیست. در این شرایط میخواستن با روش ماهرانه با یه تیر چند نشونه بزنن. یک، شیعه و سنی را به جان هم مینداختن، آمریکا رو میخواستن به تعبیر خودشون زمین گیر بکنن، آمریکا رو به زمین بنشونن. بهترین راه این بود که شیعه و سنی رو به جان هم میندازن. خب طرح دوم این بود که متولیانی که سامرا رو، اون امامین عسکریین را دست اهل سنت بگیرن و این بهترین روش که منفجر کنن. این کلیپ رو با هم دیگه میبینیم. کلیپی است که اعتراف یکی از فرماندهان آمریکایی است زمانی که حاکم بر عراق بود، در واقع قبل از اینکه حالا انتخاباتی صورت بگیره و قبل از اینکه حکومت مرکزی تشکیل بشه. ببینید ایشون چی میگه. مدتش 11 دقیقه است. با هم دیگه میبینیم و در تلگرام نیز ارسال خواهد شد. بعد از اون یاسر الحبیب آخوند کویتی هست که ایشون هم اعتراف میکنه. من نمیدونم اگر اون کلیپ رو اتاق فرمان آماده کنید ممنون میشم. این ویدیو رو با هم دیگه ببینیم.
When I went into Iraq, we believed that the Iranians had two diametrically opposed goals. One, they wanted a friendly Iraqi government installed, and two, they wanted the U.S. government to fail in its efforts to establish a democratic government inside of Iraq that respected the human rights of all Iraqis. It became clear to us over time that there was an active campaign that leveraged financial support to political organizations, humanitarian support across the south of Iraq, and military support to Shia militia to accomplish these objectives. I got my first indications of Iranian influence in Iraq about 60 days after I arrived. Some of you will recall that in the summer of 2004, coalition and Iraqi forces mounted a significant operation to break the stranglehold of the Sadrist militia on the important Iraqi town of Najaf. We succeeded. And in our review of our actions, we found something that we almost lost in the heat of battle. We found an intercept from a Quds Force operative transmitting directly from the Imam Ali Shrine to Tehran, reporting on the battle. Now, while that was my first indication, it was just the beginning of what became a harbinger of things to come. Our knowledge of what the Iranians were up to grew over time, over the next 18 months, as the Iraqis elected a parliament, developed and ratified a constitution, and elected a government based on that constitution. And throughout that period, we continued to follow their actions, to train and equip the security forces, and to influence the political process in Iraq to include the selection of two Iraqi prime ministers. I will tell you that I didn't grasp the full extent of Iranian activity until after the bombing of the Al-Askari Mosque in February of 2006. Around that time, we began to see some troubling trends. First was that we found a new and very lethal improvised explosive device. And I will tell you, without getting technical, it was clear to us that parts of the IED had to be manufactured precisely, and tools for that didn't exist in Iraq. It could only come from Iran. We had to work our way through the intelligence business. It's one thing to know that Iran is providing material and training. It's quite another to find the people that are conducting that provision of material and training in a city of 8 million people in a country of 27 million people. To do that, we set up an intelligence cell that focused on nothing but determining the impact of malign and Iranian influence in Iraq. We also made sure that the new government of Iraq clearly understood what Iran was up to. So in our early days in Iraq, I will tell you that the political influence was very visible, but what was not visible to us in the early days was the military influence.
In fact, we got our first inkling of Iraqi Quds Force influence in Iraq. Iranian Quds Force influence in Iraq. About 35 days after I got there. And some of you will remember in early August of 2004, there was a major battle in Najaf. As we went forward, basically throughout 2005, we were executing the process that had been given to us by the United Nations Security Council. We were to have elections in January 2005 to elect a transitional government, a transitional parliament that would draft a constitution. We would hold a referendum on that constitution in October. And then the Iraqis would conduct a further election in December of 2005 that would elect a government based on that constitution. So you then had in Iraq a constitutionally elected Iraqi government that would guide the country forward. We saw increased Iranian influence in the election process. Lots of money to Iraqi political parties, lots of humanitarian support in the name of gaining political support. But it wasn't until the summer of 2005 where we began to see increased military support. And at that point we saw increased Iranian arming of the Shia militia with some improvised explosive devices that were just talked about here earlier. And what we saw was our casualties were going up. So we launched a significant effort to find out where the Iranian operatives were in Iran. Because it's one thing to be able to say, yes, there's political influence, yes, there's economic influence, but to tell me where the Quds Force operative is, at what time, in what place, on what floor in the apartment building so that they can be attacked is quite another thing. So we began a significant intelligence gathering process that would allow us to target the Iranian groups. Let me talk just a second about these improvised explosive devices. They're called explosively formed penetrators. I don't want to get too technical, but they have to be made with machine tools. And that technology was not available in Iraq. They could only come from one place, and that was Iran. And these are designed, the explosives are formed in a way that they shoot a copper charge that goes so fast that it'll actually penetrate the side of a tank. And this was a significant problem for our soldiers and the Iraqi soldiers because their armored vehicles were their best protection against the improvised explosive devices. About 2 months after we started seeing the increase of this, we actually found a cache inside our city. And the cache was full of these, and they were clearly made in Iran. In addition, we found the newest type of rocket-propelled grenade that was also made in Iran. And we found a number of mortar rounds and rockets that were clearly marked with Iranian markings. And we continued over the fall and winter of 2005 to find this type of equipment. Hadi al-Amri was also the head of the Badr Corps, which was a Shia militia tied to the Sciri party now called ISKI. We believed that the Badr Corps was an active militia and was actively out conducting attacks against primarily Sunni civilians. After the
خب مدت این کلیپ 11 دقیقه است. کامل این کلیپ در تلگرام شبکه با آدرسی که در گیرنده هاتون ملاحظه می‌فرمایید ارسال خواهد شد و ملاحظه فرمودید که در مورد امامین عسکریین گفتن. جالب اینجاست که یکی از آخوندهای شیعه کویتی نیز به این قضیه اعتراف میکنه که سپاه ایران و آخوندهای ایران گروه‌های تروریستی در واقع سنی رو مواد منفجره میداده تا اینکه بر شیعه ها رو در واقع در بین شیعه ها کارهای تروریستی انجام بدن و همچنین گروه‌های تروریستی شیعه رو مواد منفجره میداده که بره نزد مساجد اهل سنت و مساجد اهل سنت رو منفجر کنه. این کلیپ رو اتاقان لطفاً پخش کنید.
لماذا؟ لأنها حكومة ترى نفسها أولا وقبل كل شيء آخر تريد الحفاظ على نظامها، على هذه الحكومة بذاتها، وإن اقتضى ذلك حتى سفك دماء الشيعة. يشهد الله أنه أحد كبار قادة التيار الصدري في العراق زارني في مكتبي في لندن، المكتب القديم، واجتمع معي، وكان اثنين أيضا من الإخوة المؤمنين شاهدين على ذلك، يعني من الإخوة العاملين في المكتب، ونحن في جلسة، وصرح لي قال: نحن الصدريين مدعومون من إيران تمدنا بمال وسلاح، ولكننا اكتشفنا بمدينة الصدر ذات مرة واحد، هذا الحكي كان تقريبا سنة 2005 على ما أتذكر أو 2006، اكتشفنا أنه واحد كان راح يفجر نفسه في مدينة الصدر من الوهابيين، من التكفيريين، من تنظيم القاعدة أو من تلك الفلول. ولما لزمناه وحققنا معاه وتتبعنا المسار أنه اكتشفنا أنه أيضا التمويل والسلاح أيضا يأتي من إيران. فيقول: ذهبت أنا واجتمعت مع الرابط بيني وبين، ما أتذكر الآن، الحرس الثوري أو إحدى الجهات الإيرانية المعروفة، وقلت له: لماذا أنتم تسلحون أعداءنا ويقتلون فينا؟ هكذا تصنعون؟ فيقول ضحك وبكل صراحة قال: ما مضمونه أنه الأمن القومي الإيراني يقتضي ذلك، أنه العراق يظل يعني تظل فيه الحروب الداخلية مشتعلة حتى أمريكا تغرق في العراق ولا تلتفت إلى إيران. القضية هكذا، يعني هؤلاء دينهم السياسة ودينهم كرسيهم، فحكومة إيران لا اعتبار بها، حكومة مسلوبة الشرعية.
بله، به همین خاطر بعد از انقلاب 57 دیدید که شیعه و سنی جنگ‌های مذهبی و فرقه‌ای در منطقه بالا گرفت، چون هدف اینها نه دلشون به شیعیان علوی در واقع که پایبند این خرافات نیستن، نه دلش به اینها سوخته، نه به اهل سنت، بلکه هدفش اینی که شیعه و سنی را به جان هم بیاندازد و از راه دور نظارگر به این قتل و تفرقه و آتش فتنه به راه بیاندازد. شاهد از همه این مباحث این بود که اینها خودشون امامین عسکریین را منفجر کردن. این کلیپ نیز در تلگرام ارسال خواهد شد. کلیپ اول ژنرال کیسی بود، یکی از فرماندهان نیروی زمینی آمریکا که مدارک در واقع ارائه داد، و همچنین یاسر الحبیب آخوند کویتی که این ارائه داد در تلگرام نیز ارسال